Hi everyone, my name is Goblin, and welcome to another build video for the Elder Scrolls Online. Today we're looking at a Stamina Necromancer DPS setup that I have put together. First things first, we can have a look at the stats. So I'm going to pop a potion. We don't have any other buffs. So we're at 34k max stamina, 13k max health, 11k magicka. We've got very high stamina recovery at 1800, 54% weapon critical, which actually goes 59% on our front bar, and we've got almost 4000 weapon damage without any of our in-combat buffs running, so that's quite high as well. So overall, very high weapon damage. Obviously health is a little bit low. We can get more out of that by using different food when we're in content, depending on our sustain needs. For the Mundus, I'm running the Shadow, and I am an Orc as well. Alright, let's get into the skills. So, for the Necromancer skills, a lot of our skills are going to come from the Grave Lord tree. On our front bar, we are running Camo Hunter, Barbed Trap, Detonating Siphon, Blighted Blastbones, Venom Skull, and Pestilent Colossus. And on the back bar, we're running Camo Hunter again, Endless Hail, Skeletal Archer, Necrotic Potency, Ring of Preservation, and Flawless Dawnbreaker. So pretty much all of our skills, except for Endless Hail, are either Necromancer skills or Fighter's Guild skills, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. But first things first, Pestilent Colossus, that comes from Gravelord. It's more of a frozen Colossus. This does a ton of damage in a massive AoE and applies major vulnerability, and this is the only source of major vulnerability in the game. It lasts for 15 total seconds, and increases the damage that the enemy takes by 10% for everyone on your team. So that's going to be great. We have Venom Skull. This is a pretty unique Necromancer ability. It's part of what the build is built around. It doesn't do a ton of damage, but every third cast deals 20% increased damage. So our rotation is built around only casting this when we're getting the damage bonus. And any Necromancer ability that we cast while this is slotted counts towards that stack. So we're going to be casting 2 Necromancer abilities, Flame Skull. 2 more abilities, Flame Skull. That also plays into this. We have Blighted Blastbones. This skill does a ton of damage, but it takes about 3 seconds to go off. It's an instant cast ability, but it takes time for the skeleton to assemble and then do the damage. So we are going to also be needing to be casting 2 abilities in between each Blastbones. Then we have on the front bar, Detonating Siphon. This is a dot ability that creates a tether between you and a corpse on the ground. It does a lot of dot damage, as well as when it ends, it creates an explosion that deals additional damage. And we're going to be using that to our advantage, as well as when it's slotted, we get a damage done increase of 3%, which is great. The other skills we have on the front bar both come from the Fighter's Guild. We have Barbed Trap. This is going to be our source of minor force, and we have Camouflage Hunter. This is going to give us major savagery and minor berserk if we attack from a flank, which is good, as well as it counts towards our Fighter's Guild passives for increased damage for having it on our bar. To the back bar, we have Camo Hunter again, and we have a weapon skill. This is our only weapon skill from the bow line. This is Endless Hail. It is a long duration AoE dot that we can apply with our bow. Then we go back to Gravelord. We have Skeletal Archer. This is a pet that shoots arrows and does damage, and it ramps up over time, and this is actually quite a high damage dot, so we do want to keep this up at all times, as well as it provides a corpse for our next skill, which I will talk about. Necrotic Potency consumes nearby corpses to give us ultimate. And it stacks up. The more corpses that are nearby, the more ultimate we get. So the way that the rotation works is we are guaranteed to get at least 2 corpses, plus obviously anything that has actually died in the content nearby to generate more ultimate for us so that we can get the most damage possible and buff the team damage as well. So that is what this build is centered around. This is a very crucial skill. And we go back to the Fighters Guild. We have 2 more skills here. We have Ring of Preservation. This is our heal. It's going to give us minor protection and a rapid dot heal in the AoE. And we have Flawless Dawnbreaker. This is just here. We're not casting this at all except for in very specific situations during execute. But essentially not really casting it. It's just there. We get a little bit of a damage bonus on our back bar, which again is not huge, but it's more than nothing, and we are only casting our Colossus off the front bar anyways. I've kind of played around with this, and it seems that just slotting this in on the back bar doesn't do any harm. But you, of course, if you're in actual content and you want to have reanimate on hand, this is a very good ultimate. Can instantly resurrect your teammates, and you may want to put this on your back bar as a just in case, since this is really contributing a very small amount of damage. It is some damage, but it's a very small amount, and you're not really giving up much to have this slotted in case you need it. Obviously, depending on what you're doing. If you're going for no death runs, then this isn't going to help you because people have to die for you to use it. But anyways, that is our active skills. So I'm going to quickly talk about passives, and I'm really only going to go into the Necromancer passives. You guys by now most likely know about Fighters Guild, but I'll just go over quickly. You want the Fighters Guild ones because when you slot Fighters Guild abilities, you get increased damage. That's simply why we use Fighters Guild. Undaunted is going to give you max stats. We don't need Mages Guild. We don't need Siege Order. And armor, we want all of the medium armor passives. You can skip improved sneak. These are going to give us more damage and sustain. Overall, we are wearing 7 pieces of medium armor. For the weapons, we are using dual wield on the front bar. You are going to want all of these. They all increase your damage and give you specific effects, especially we're using an axe and a dagger. The axe applies a bleed if we have the dual wield passives, which is very helpful. For the bow passives, again, these are all going to be helpful. They're going to increase your damage a little bit. Now, we are a melee-based class, so these bow passives are not doing a lot. Overall, it's much more important to prioritize dual wield and your class passives, but you're still going to want to have these. Now, for trash pulls, we are using a two-handed, and I'll talk about this a little bit later when we get to the rotations and the gear setups. You should have this, but you don't need it. You can just run the same stuff in AoE situations or trash pulls, and it will work just fine. But if you want to maximize your effectiveness in those scenarios, running a two-hander on the front bar is going to be the most effective, and you'll want to have these passives. The reason that we're using a two-hander on the front bar is because of some of these passives for those scenarios. All right, so now I'll talk about the Necromancer passives. Reusable parts is going to be really important. It's going to reduce the cost of our Blastbones, which we are casting quite frequently. Death Knell is extremely important. As you can see on our front bar, we are going to be getting a 40% critical bonus during execute, which is going to put us over 100%, essentially. And even if our set stacks drop off, we will still have 100% during execute. So that is extremely important to have, because all of our execute on this build comes from this passive, as well as our jewelry traits ramping up our damage over time with the enemy's health scaling down. We don't have any execute skills that expressly do more damage. Dismember. This is going to be really important because while we have a Gravelord ability active, we are always going to have our Siphoning going, and our Skeletal Archer for that matter. This is going to give us penetration. This allows us to save some CP on pen and spec it into other areas. Rapid Rot increases our damage over time damage, which is great because some of our highest damaging abilities is the damage over time from Detonating Siphon, Endless Hail, and Skeletal Archer. Those are all in the top 10 most damaging effects that we have throughout the parse. For Bone Tyrant, this is generally the tanking skill line, but we do still have some important things here. Death Gleaning, when an enemy you're in combat with dies, you restore Magicka and Stamina. This just plays into our sustain. You are going to want to have this, especially for long ad pulls and trash fights. It's going to be very helpful. Reduces the damage taken over while you have a Bone Tyrant ability active. Now, we don't generally have a Bone Tyrant ability active, so you don't really need this. But again, there are going to be scenarios where you might want to slot specific things, like Scythe if you need more healing, and that actually has an active time on it when you hit the third cast, so it could come into effect. You don't have any slotted, again, except on the back bar, so this isn't huge, but a 2% healing bonus on the back bar is never going to hurt, especially because that is where our heal is, so if you get into trouble, 2% more off of this is going to help a little bit. Increases max health. This is important. You want to have this. Your healing done is increased when you have a negative effect. Again, we're not doing very much healing. We do have a heal slotted, but you don't necessarily need this. We don't have any healing abilities that we're going to be trying to crit with. Again, not super important. This is really important. When you use an ability on a corpse, you generate 10 ultimate. Well, we use this ability on our corpses, and we use this ability on our corpses all the time. So this is more ultimate generation, which is part of the central focus of this build. So corpse consumption is extremely important. And this, again, increases our recovery while we have a Blastbones, Skeletal Mage, or Spirit Mender active. We do want that. We don't have any Magicka abilities, so that's not really going to affect us. But our stamina, because all of our abilities cost stamina, literally all of them, stam recovery is going to be very important for us. And these abilities are going to be up all the time. Alright, so that is it for the class passives. The only other thing that I should touch on is make sure you get the medicinal use in the alchemy skill line. Our source of major brutality is our potion. And we do want to have maximum uptime on that. It makes a massive difference throughout the course of a parse. Thousands of DPS. So this, and that's using the same potions just without this passive. This passive alone can contribute 2 to 3k DPS just by having it and doing exactly the same thing. So it's very important to have and very worthwhile to level up your alchemy for it. Alright, so I'm going to get into the gear. On the monster set, I'm wearing Domihaus. This basically gives us a proc that improves our weapon damage, and it does have a damaging effect, but this effect, it's kind of a weird, very large ring. You're really not hitting the dot effect from this monster set very often, but the weapon damage itself elevates it above other sets like Celine's, particularly for this build because we aren't using any weapon skills. Our Celine's proc was not very consistent, and this ended up performing better. On the body we have perfected Relequens. This is pretty standard, a staple of single target damage. For our AoE set we will be wearing something else, and I'll show you that, but this is what we're going to be using for parsing and for boss fights. We have Advancing Yokeda or Berserking Warrior set for our second 5-piece set. That's on the front bar. So we have an axe, dagger, 3 jewelry. And on the back bar, we are using a Maelstrom's Perfected Bow. You do not need Perfected. It will make a very minimal difference. Obviously, it is preferred, though. And this is going to increase the damage that our volley deals by ramping it up over time, stacking up to 8 times, increasing the damage. So it can start hitting for 5,000-6,000 per tick near the tail end, as well as our Necromancer passive that increases our dot damage is going to be very effective in amplifying that. So our volley does a lot of damage with this build. In terms of traits on that gear, we have all divines on the armor pieces with stamina enchantments. On our jewelry, we are all bloodthirsty with weapon damage enchants. Our axe and our dagger, our axe is Nirnhoned, our dagger is precise. Doesn't matter for the enchants because we're using double dot poison. You can craft this. You can get it from, your daily login bonus. It's called damage poison 9 or something when you craft it. And it's any poison that has double dot. If you have, trash poisons that you just picked up, those are single dot poisons. Those will work just fine too. It'll be a slight damage difference. And our Maelstrom's bow is, of course, infused with a weapon damage enchantment on the back that will be able to be procced off of our Endless Hail even when we're on our front bar. So this will effectively give us basically 100% uptime on almost 500 weapon damage, which gives us a lot overall throughout the course of the fight. Now, for AoE situations, I am using something a little bit different. So as you can see, because I don't use any weapon skills, I can actually swap to a two-hander without changing any of my skills over. And the rotation is exactly the same, but the two-hander light attacks can hit multiple targets because of those passives. So for AoE situations, we are going to be using Azure Blight on the body. Again, all divines with his stamina enchantments. And for our front bar, we're going to be using Leviathan. This is going to give us the most critical chance against all the targets without having to stack it up. Advancing Yokeda gives more overall once you've stacked it up, but Leviathan gives the most of any stamina set without requiring any stacking. We're going to be using infused weapon damage jewelry. So this is infused now because, again, we're not guaranteeing that any of the targets that we're hitting are low health. We want to hit all of them for as much as possible. And we are using a Leviathan Greatsword with Precise. This is going to increase our critical even more. We have super high crit chance while we're using this. And we are going to be able to hit multiple targets and get the Greatsword damage bonus as well. And we're keeping our Maelstrom and we're keeping our Domihaus. So, for consumables, I am presently using Lavafoot Soup and Sultrus. And as a Necromancer, because of your health bonus, and as an Orc, because you get another health bonus there, you can actually probably get away with this in content if your tank is wearing Ebon and you have a Warden and you're getting minor toughness. If you have both of those things, you can get away with this. If you don't have both of those things, the next best thing for you is going to be Artaeum Takeaway Broth or Dubious Cameron Throne. That's going to continue to give you sustain while also giving you health. And if you find that your sustain is fine, like you're in an optimized trial group and your healers are giving you a lot of sustain, as a DPS, you're getting orbs or shards all the time, and you don't have any issues with sustain, you can use the buy-stat food, that is the Braised Rabbit, and that's going to give you the most amount of health and the most amount of stamina, which will actually give you the best damage if you can sustain. So it's up to you to work out with your group. For pugging, I would just recommend running the Dubious Cameron Throne. It's not too expensive, and it's going to give you a little bit of everything that you need. For potions, we are using the Essence of Weapon Power or the Alliance Battle Drought. This gives us major endurance, restores stamina, gives us major savagery, which we already have covered, but we can use those abilities as a flex slot if we need something else. And it also gives us major brutality, which we do need because we don't have another source of that. For the poisons, I already went over the double dot poisons, and you can use those double dot poisons on the AoE setup as well, because the only thing that will proc our poison or enchantment is light attacks. It's not really gonna matter very much. You shouldn't be proccing it that often in AoE situations anyways. If you don't want to run poisons, you can use a disease enchantment on the greatsword. Alright, I'm going to quickly go over the AoE rotation. It's very simple. Now, we have our Pestilent Colossus. So, in AoE situations, again, you're going to have to work this out with your trial group. Or, if you're pugging, you can just throw it down whenever you want. You're definitely going to want to, you know, if you feel comfortable using your Colossus, you don't think there's a boss coming up, or you can regenerate it before you get to the boss, you can certainly throw it down. But I'll cover that. I'm going to cover it without that in the mix. So we're going to have our potion. All right. We are going to want to do a Blastbones and a trap. Throw down our volley. Get our archer going. And then we're just going to go Blastbones, Siphon, Skull. Blastbones, Siphon, Skull. And as you can see, I do a Blastbones, get the Endless Hail going again, Blastbones, Siphon, Skull. This is all there is to it, and as you can see, it is pulling 140,000 DPS on these skeletons as that is going off. Now you can see that I'm lagging a little bit. That is the Azurblade going off. But it is extremely potent. It stacks up very quickly and deals a ton of damage. If I look at this, Blightseed is blowing up all of those skeletons for so much, and we're maintaining over 20k damage on 6 targets simultaneously. It is a stupid amount of cleave damage. And the only reason we're using a two-hander is so that our light attacks, as we're weaving them, hit multiple skeletons. That's the only reason. Of course, you can get away with using dual wield if you have that at your disposal and you don't have the two-hander. But this is going to be the best for AoE situations. And obviously, this will go up if we actually cast our Pestilent Colossus on the big group. All right, so I'm going to switch back to the normal set. And our single target rotation is a little bit more complex, but it works off of the same principle. We are creating corpses, consuming them to gain ultimate. We're going to be using the Pestilent Colossus to buff our group damage as well as our own damage. And we are doing something interesting. I don't know if anyone else really does this, but I thought it was an interesting, unique part of the Necromancer class is that you can use the Siphon as a bit of a spammable because it detonates. And it's not very long. Our other dots are longer than it. So rather than having to cast it twice per rotation, we can just use it as a spammable. And then when we go to cast our other dots, it just keeps damage going the entire time. So that's kind of what I've gone for with this. So to start at the fight, the first thing we want to do is cast a Blastbones. That's going to give us a corpse to consume when we go to our back bar. Now immediately after casting Blastbones, I'm going to put down a trap and swap. Then I'm going to do my Endless Hail and my Archer. Now at this point, since I would have casted that Blastbones, there's going to be a corpse on the ground. I'm going to consume it and swap back. The consume is an instant cast, so we can immediately do that. Now, at this point, so we go Blastbones, Trap, Hail, Archer, Consume. At this point, we should have one stack on Venom Skull, because we've cast one Blastbones on the front bar. Then we're going to go Blastbones again, Skull. That's going to consume our stack on the Skull. And then we're going to get into the continued rotation, which is static. So after that Skull, you're going to be going, you've gone Blastbones, Skull. You're going to be going Trap, Blastbones, Siphon, Skull. Blastbones, Siphon, Skull. Blastbones, Siphon, Skull. Blastbones, swap. So we're using the Siphon as a spammable while we're filling the gap between our Blastbones and our Skull procs. The reason we cast Barb Trap in that spot is because when you go Blastbones, Skull, there's a gap before you can cast another Blastbones. We need to fit one more ability there. So that is naturally the best spot for us to recast the trap. So from the beginning, this looks like Blastbones, Trap, Hail, Archer, Consume, Blastbones, Skull, Trap, Blastbones, Siphon, Skull, one more time, and then Blastbones, Swap, Hail. And that's it. That's all there is to it. We're going to keep going with that. Now, when we cast our ult, we're just going to fit it in anywhere on the front bar. And the reason it's like that is we want to cast the ult as many times as possible. It doesn't need to go in a specific spot. You want to cast it off of cooldown. So at the start of the fight, when we cast it, we can fit it in right after our trap goes down. Or right before. It's up to you. You can go Blastbones, Colossus, Trap, and start. And that's going to give us a good burst of damage at the front of the parse. And then we are able to just continue from there. Other times when you may want to cast it is when you get onto the front bar. Remember, we're doing consume right before we swap. So when you get onto the front bar, you may have it up. You do want to cast your Blastbones first, then you can fit it in, then do the Skull, and then continue on from there. And that will add one ability to the rotation on the front, but we don't really lose any uptime on our back bar dots. We lose about 1 second, maybe more like half a second on our hail, which is not a big deal because we want that to go through to completion anyways. It's better to have a half a second gap at the end than to be recasting it too early, which is why we are running right up until it runs out on our front bar and then swapping and casting it on the back bar. The only other thing that I really need to go over with this is because of advancing Yuketa, we need to make at least one light attack every 5 seconds. So on our front bar, I should say, because we are only front barring this and it only works off of melee damage, so it won't work on our back bar anyways. So what does this mean? We can't spend too much time on the back bar, which is why we're not casting the ult off of the back bar ever. So what I have found is that if I go, let's stack this up, right? Okay, so we're at 10 stacks, right? If I go Blastbones, light attack weave, it's so close there's a chance that it goes down there, especially if you don't weave perfectly on the back bar. So what I have found is that it's much safer and gives you better uptime on Yuketa throughout the fight to go light attack Blastbones, instantly cast hail, then weave the next two. You saw instead of having about 0.2 seconds to spare, we had about 0.6. So that actually saves us time on the back bar and guarantees that our Yuketa won't go down. And that one, a light attack on the back bar, is not worth it. The crit chance from Yuketa is going to give us more damage throughout the parse if we keep it up than that one light attack does every time we go to the back bar. So I find that is the best way to go. Our execute is exactly the same. We do not have a varied execute rotation. The only thing you want to keep in mind is when you get down to like 2%, you just want to keep going with the Blastbones, Siphon Skull, Blastbones, Siphon Skull. Don't recast anything once you're below 3% or 2%. Just power through to the end and keep that damage going. Alright, I'm going to go over the CP very quickly. So we have in our blue CP, 18 piercing is going to get us to the maximum penetration on the dummy for a Necromancer. Talk to your raid lead if you're doing trials. This may be different depending on how much penetration your team can provide. As a Necromancer, you shouldn't need any points into piercing with a fully optimized raid group. 64 mighty. All of our damage is poison, disease, or physical. Thaumaturge, we are doing actually a fair amount of dot damage, despite not having too many dot skills, or at least it looks like that at first. But we do have 4 dot skills running, and they're all very high damage, except for Barbed Trap, which is, we need it for the minor force. So 19% there for 52 points. Our precise strikes, we do go up to almost or over 100% crit during execute. So 22% increased damage from 67 in precise strikes is going to be big for us. 66 Master at Arms, this is all of our direct damage. Our Blastbones is our highest damage ability that we have, and it is direct damage, so 66 here is going to be really great. And 3 into Physical Weapons Expert, this just turns out to give you mathematically a little bit more due to our light attack weaving. And we are keeping up light attack weaves on the front bar, obviously for the Relequens and Yokeda stacks. None in the apprentice tree. For green, you can pretty much distribute however you want. I like to have 75 in shadow for the treasure hunter passive. So tumbling and blocking, that's going to be pretty good for us. Mooncalf, I recommend always going 100 Mooncalf, 20 tenacity in case you ever need to heavy attack, and that gives us the wind running passive, which increases our movement speed a little bit, as well as we get a couple other things. And then for this tree, I recommend again having 75 in the tower to get these passives. They're not incredibly important, but it's nice to have them. And, you know, having some Warlord, Sprinter, and Bashing Focus, because we are so stamina based, it's important to have reduction into all of those. For the red CP, I do always recommend that you look at ESO University and follow their CP guides for the content that you are doing. You're going to be able to mitigate the most possible that way. I've just thrown some points in here. You can do something like this, but I'm not really going to go over it too quickly or too closely. All right, so that's it for our champion points. So I will show you what I got with this setup. We were able to pull 93.1k DPS. Now, this isn't the highest number that you will ever see on a Necromancer, but what I can tell you is that if you see a higher number, I guarantee you that they are not generating as many Pestilent Colossus ults as I am. They're casting one at the start, and then they're using Dawnbreaker, and they're using two-handed with an execute slotted, which means that they're not using the consume skill on the back bar, and they will have less ult throughout the fight, which means less uptime for your team buff of your Pestilent Colossus ult. So with that said, this build is focused on generating that ult, getting maximum uptime on that ult, and at the same time being able to pull high damage. It's not 100% purely damage oriented. Now, with that said, 93, very high number. We're getting very high effective crit, 78%. Our weapon damage is sitting up around 6k, which is amazing. That's very high. Our penetration is perfect. I believe the dummy has something like 3228 exactly. So we're able to do that. We've got perfect uptime on our Archer, our Major Brutality, our Berserking Warrior, our Damage Enchantment, and Siphon, all above 95%. Domihaus actually gives us very good uptime as well, 74%. That's going to be giving us a lot of weapon damage, as you can see throughout the parse. Our debuff uptimes, harmful winds, very high. Barb trap, very high. We get decent amount out of the bleed. We are only applying that with light attacks, same with the poisons. So it's not as high as it could go, but you know, we are able to pull quite a lot of damage with this setup. I'll let you look at the graph. It steadily climbs slowly over time. It doesn't have huge spikes during execute, but that passive crit and our bloodthirsty jewelry ramps us up over time. And here's the setup and the champion points and everything, which we've already gone over. But if you want to look at this, as you can see, the only thing is that it says I'm missing 15 light attacks after my Blastbones. But that's when I'm casting Blastbones, instantly swapping, and instantly casting Endless Hail again. So that's intentional, to be missing those light attacks. Where it's not an actual miss, that's on purpose. All right, so I am gonna do an example parse for you. Got my ult built up. Got that. I've got food. Charge my weapon. This rotation is a lot of fun. It is very smooth once you get it down. Some of my Nightblade muscle memory was messing with me for a little bit, but once I got past that, it worked out really well. So first things first, we're gonna Blastbones, potion, do that, trap. Forgot to do that, so I'm gonna go like that, and we're into it. So there's the Siphon, Skull. We're gonna do one more Skull. Blastbone swap. Get that ult. See our ult, we just casted it and it's already over 100. And everything is timed out perfectly. Okay, we're going to cast the ult and continue on with the rotation exactly as if we're not replacing anything with the ult, we're just casting it in addition to what we were already doing. A potion there. It's coming back up soon. We should be able to cast our ult before we leave the front bar here. Might be right at the end. Okay, we're gonna cast it here. Get our last Blastbones in. Consume that, and we're already back up to 50 ult. So that's where this build really comes in handy, is our ult uptime is way better than if we were using some specific skills during execute. Oh, I lost my Berserking Warrior there, that's unfortunate. Must have missed a light attack, that's okay. Our ult is almost up again. We might be able to cast it before we swap. It's not going to happen. That's okay. We're going to cast it as soon as we get to the front. Oh, I missed it. That's okay. one too many there, that's okay. Getting down to 25%, so our crit is going to start going off the wall. Put the ultimate in there. Blastbones gets to swap. Quite low percentage, but we're not low enough to just stick it out to the end net yet. Now we're just going to stick it out. Alright, and that was 91.5, so a little bit lower. I did make a few mistakes throughout, but that's overall. Again, you're never going to be sad about getting 91. Anything over 90, in my opinion, is more than enough. So there you have it. That is my Necromancer build for the Markarth patch. Thank you everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy this video, please leave a like and consider subscribing. I'm going to be making more videos like this in the near future. I already have a few up, and I'm gonna start getting over to some mag DPS builds and tank builds, and possibly even a healer or two in the near future. So don't worry, I'm not only going to be covering stamina DPS. I've done several of those already, so I'm going to start transitioning over to some Magicka builds and tank builds as I get more videos going. All right, thank you for watching, everyone, and have a nice day.